So if you have a variable here that's global or on the module level, and you look up the value, that's perfectly fine. We do that all the time. But if you actually set this value here, that makes the code harder to maintain. And that's the big reason that global variables are discouraged in programming, is because any bit of code can change the value of a global variable. And so if you get to a particular piece of code and this thing doesn't have the right value, it's really hard to figure out where this value came from. So if any bit of code can change this value here and it doesn't have the right value, then I have to try to find out what bit of code anywhere in my program got called last that caused this thing to have the wrong value. And that's really hard to do. It's a pain when you're debugging lots of code. So that's considered harmful. Having global variables that you change the value of is considered harmful. And so Python made it extra difficult to do that. So the bottom line here, let me go ahead and fix this here. So, and for the sake of argument, I'm going to do that. So this is fine because I can look up the value of val and it's 3. There's no problem there. But this line is considered harmful because I'm changing the value of a global variable in a way that makes my code harder to understand and debug if it's not working correctly. And so by default in Python, this is not legal. This does not work in Python the way it's written. And so I get this little red curly here, unresolved reference val, but only because I'm trying to change the value of val, which is not legal right now. So if I take out the thing that's changing the value of val, this works fine. But if I put in this line that changes the value of val, this becomes an error now because val is undefined. In order to make this work, Python requires me to take an extra step, declaring val to be global. So this says, I know that val is global. It's defined outside of the function scope. And I want to change the value inside of here anyhow, even though that's considered dangerous. So now this thing says, okay, it's okay that I'm going to change this global variable here. And now I don't get any kind of error. And then, but if I go ahead and put this val back in, this isn't actually a global variable. This is still the global variable. This is not the global variable. If I want to refer to this thing here, I have to do this instead. I have to declare it as non-local. So there's just a local variable inside the scope, or there's a non-local thing which is inside the scope that this is inside of, or there's a global thing which is outside of the functions entirely.